Hi everybody. My name's Mel. It's a little echoey in here because I'm at a library study space, so I apologize for the acoustics. Um, Welcome to episode 1 of my long-awaited YouTube series that I have been very, I don't want to say excited for, but like very encouraged to be able to start and continue. First episode is basically going to be a little bit of a context episode, so relating to my experience, relating to the various experiences that not only I've had but many others have had when it comes to being among the hidden homeless in London. Some of the struggles. It's just going to be basically a lot of context to try and prepare you for future episodes so that you guys know where I'm coming from, like mentally and environmentally, I guess you could say. So, a little bit of backstory on me. I've been involved both personally and indirectly with the whole issue of homelessness and poverty since I was 16, which is weird because it was literally 20 years ago this month that I became a homeless youth. I wrote about this on my blog. I kind of did a life story thing, but it helps to give a face to a story too. But at 16, I became a homeless youth. And back then, things were not as youth-centered, in my opinion, back then than they are now, especially locally here in London. I come from Stratford, Ontario. I was one of the people that still to this day got given a bus ticket back when Greyhound was still a thing, 20 years ago. Greyhound was still a thing. And I was basically sent here because at the time, the youth shelter in Stratford was only for males. So, and obviously that presented an obvious barrier. I rented rooms from people for the first little bit. I couch surfed with some friends until school ended because I left in February of 2004. I keep on saying 2024 because I'm so used to saying 2024 now. But in 2004, in February, I left home and became a homeless youth, started by couch surfing with friends from school due to the circumstances surrounding me becoming a homeless youth. And then I was hooked up with an agency I'm pretty sure is now called Stratford Per Shelter. Like, it used to be called Stratford and Area Access to Independent Living, or SAIL. And I was hooked up with them when all my couch surfing options with friends kind of fell through, and they matched me with a room provider through there, because I guess they had private homeowners that would rent out rooms to their clients. Of course, I got put with a senior person, which, looking back, I kind of feel bad for how things went, because at that time I was not in the mental maturity level that I am now, where I can, better work with people that I'm renting rooms from, and et cetera, et cetera. So I wasn't the greatest tenant at times. I tried to be like as quiet as I could. Of course, me and this person had a shared fandom of wrestling, so twice a week we'd sit down and watch wrestling together. We'd have meals together all the time. So it was a pretty good environment, it just, like, the dynamic between a youth and an elderly person is never perfect. And I know in my experience, it certainly wasn't. So after a few of those, actually it was just the one, I was like, all right, what can we do next? Because this isn't working for them or I, so we need to figure something out. And it wasn't like the fact that I was a terrible person or anything. It was just, it wasn't a working dynamic. So I was given a bus ticket and sent here to London. And back then, the only option for youth at that point in time was the Salvation Army, because I guess Cross Zone used to be a thing, but that had shut down. So I was, they referred me to the Salvation Army. That's how I got, I had to go to the Salvation Army in Stratford to get my bus ticket to London. And then I was referred to the Salvation Army here because that was the only youth shelter spaces they had. And I will get into all of that. I'm just giving a brief summary of what has led me up to now. To say that it wasn't a proper environment for youth is an understatement, and the fact that they still sometimes have youth coming in there. But again, I'll get into that in a future video. Trust me, I have an entire video worth of ideas devoted to the shelter system, not only for youth, but also for adults. But yeah, I stayed at the Salvation Army when I got here in 2004. Didn't last long. I stayed maybe a few days, kind of kept to myself. Had a few friends here that, I came into contact with. And, it was pretty good. But I think it was like a max, like a weekend. We had a youth floor, which is now the women's floor on 6th floor. That was our floor back in the day. And we had like 4 or 5 youth to a room, and it was pretty, it was pretty calm. I would say compared to modern day Salvation Army, which again I'll get into in a later video, but it wasn't the most stable, and it wasn't the most safe because as a youth, I was 16, you're being tossed into, actually I think it was I was 16, 17, 18, depending, I can't remember the timeline exactly, but I know I was a youth, that's all I know. But even as a youth, if you're being thrown into an environment where you're having to stand in line and eat with people that are, older than you by a large margin in some cases, and you have your own issues to deal with as a youth, and I would say I grew up very unaware of the issue of homelessness and poverty, because it was not something I experienced or was exposed to until I left home. So it was jarring. Fights, it's not a proper, throwing youth in with a bunch of adults is just, it's not a recipe for success, let me tell you. And funny thing is that, well, not really funny, but sarcasm. The odd thing is that the reason why I left the Salvation Army was because another one of the youth actually attacked me. I remember it vividly to this day. I'm getting off the elevator, because, the layout hasn't changed much. I was getting off the elevator, I think I was just, coming down for a snack or something. And this other individual just comes out of nowhere and just, reaches around it right in the head, right? Right in front of staff. The front desk is literally, steps from that elevator. So, and at that point I was like, all right, there's gotta be a better option, because I can't stay here. They're on my floor. Like, we don't really have any security that keeps us apart. We did have better security back then, I will give them that. But again, I'll get into that in a future video. But so I left there, and I ended up at Unity Project on Dundas Street. I actually walked from Salvation Army to Unity Project, so I was just like, all right, I'm out. Like, I don't know where I'm going, but I'll figure something out. And a few of my friends had suggested, hey, and a few of the staff actually had said, hey, there's, Unity Project. It's, a smaller scale shelter compared to this, and which means there's more staff, which means there's like more one-to-one supports. And of course, things are more carefully monitored because it's a smaller population in a smaller space. So I was like, okay, cool, like, I will take that. So I went to Unity Project, and I was there for a bit. I was in the women's dorm, which I haven't been back to Unity Project in years, so I don't even know how that whole thing works, but I know that ours was, actually I think this was in 2006 by the time I got here. Yeah, because I had stayed with the senior for upwards of a year and a half. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to figure out my own timeline here. It'll make sense eventually. Or was it 2005? No, it was 2005. Yeah, it was 2005. And the only reason I know it was 2005 was because I was in the TV lounge, me being a wrestling fan. I remember 2005 like yesterday. I was in the TV lounge at Unity Project when the episode of Raw, that was the tribute show to Eddie Guerrero, aired, so I know it was in 2005. It was in November of 2005. So now we're up to date here. But so I stayed there for a while, and of course, when I think I started looking for, I think I started renting rooms at that point. Or did I, see, timeline is, 20 years, timeline gets skewed a little bit. I think, yeah. So I had won Goo Goo Dolls tickets from a local radio station. I think it was Fresh FM. Yeah, Fresh FM. And at that point, I was in a relationship, long distance, with somebody that lived in Guelph. Or they still lived in Stratford at the time. This was before they went off to university in Guelph, so they were still living in Stratford. That makes sense. Okay, so, and it just got to a point where I just wasn't getting anywhere with housing, etc. So I had managed to get my name on the housing list for RGI housing in that time. So I decided to sell the ticket I had won or give it away. I actually gave it away. My friend actually paid me for it, even though I gave it away technically. But they were like, hey, I'll help you with the cost of a bus ticket or a train ticket to get to where you're going if you give me the Goo Goo Dolls tickets. So it wasn't really a sale per se, it was just kind of like a trade. And for what those tickets were going for, it was actually a pretty good deal. So yeah, I was able to find a way to, I believe I moved to Cambridge at that point. Yeah, I believe I moved to Cambridge to stay at Argus House. Yes, at Argus House. I think just to be closer, because I think this was just after my partner at the time had, gone off to not only join the military, but also was going to University of Guelph. Boo, University of Guelph. No, I'm kidding. But I moved to Cambridge to be closer to them because I didn't even know Guelph was an option at that point. So I moved to Cambridge. There was Arcus House there in Preston. I haven't been back there in years either. I would really love to go back there and, visit with staff and, tell them thanks for everything they did for me. Maybe one day. But yeah, I moved to Cambridge, got a job at McDonald's, Sports World McDonald's. Sports World was still open back then, okay? That's how long ago it was. Yeah, so I got a job at, there, and gotta love downtown. Got a job at the McDonald's, and then I think I moved back to Stratford because I think in that time the youth shelter became co-ed. No, I moved back to London. That's right. I moved back to London. Yeah, because I didn't move from Cambridge to Guelph. I moved from Cambridge to London and then to Guelph. I've moved a lot. So I left Cambridge because I just I can't even remember the timeline. I think, did I move to? I think I came back here for a bit, rented a few rooms, and then, yeah, rented a few rooms here. Of course, when I got back, I immediately came to the Unity Project because I wasn't, I avoided the Salvation Army like the plague, much like I do now. Again, I'll get into reasons why in another video. But, yeah, I moved back here because I think I just, right. Yeah, I moved here, but momentarily, because I moved to Guelph not long after. I did a lot of shelter shuffles throughout Cambridge, Guelph, and London. But I know in that little bit of time I moved a lot. I can't quite, I wish I could get the timeline down, but I think I moved back here, because I don't think I moved right to Guelph from Cambridge. No, I moved back here for a bit and then moved to Guelph. Yeah. And when I moved to Guelph, I found a job at the Taco Bell Stone Road Mall, Taco Bell KFC, and found a room for rent, and it was fantastic. It was only a sublet though, so it was temporary. And before you knew it, I think in that time, when I moved to Guelph, that's when Stratford Per Shelter Lake became co-ed. So I moved back from, I moved from Guelph to Stratford. I do remember that. This was 2007. So in the span of a year and a half, I moved around a lot. As you can see, I can't even get the timeline straight. I'm pretty sure if I go back and just review emails and such, actually I think I deleted most of my old emails, but pretty sure if I look it up somewhere, it'll be there. But so I moved to Stratford. Just gotta check that my phone's not overheating. Because phones overheat when you're recording video for a long time. But so I moved back to Stratford because they became co-ed, and yeah. And I think part of the reason why I can't remember the timeline accurately is because of all the traumatic stuff that I witnessed in that span of time. So eventually I think I'll get that timeline out, but I know right now it's not clicking. So I moved back to Stratford, And of course, I'd come to London, visit friends all the time because I still had friends here. And I still had social supports that I kept in touch with that I didn't really have in any other city. Yeah, I think in that time I also tried to attend school. I tried to go to GCBI at one point. I think did I try school no, it was only in Guelph that I tried to go to school. GCBI, I remember that. And I think not long after I got back here, because I moved back here again after Stratford, and after my car accident on New Year's Eve of December 31st, 2007, so New Year's Eve 2008, technically. So I was in my car accident, and that woke me up a lot because I think I'll touch on that in a different video, but at that point I was so beaten down because I had no real ongoing supports as a youth. Of course it didn't help that I kept moving to different cities, but even then it's I didn't have any consistent supports other than the ones I had here, and even they couldn't help when I was in a different city, you know what I mean? So I had to learn a lot of things myself. And that's the main reason why eventually I would love to go into social work, and so I can be the kind of support I didn't have for somebody else that's going through this very same scenario, or even a different scenario. But yeah, so this is my way of manifesting that, okay? But anyway, so I moved back here after my car accident in February. Now keep in mind I had applied for RGI housing in 2005, 2006. So I think January, February, I might have applied for it. Of course, my old CMHA workers retired and that file was closed, so I don't know if it continued on to my new one. I don't know, but maybe that will help with the timeline. Because my CMHA worker back then kept very good notes. So, but it's been so long. It's just, yeah. So I moved back here after my car accident, mostly to keep an eye on my best friend that was in the car accident with me, because they took the brunt in a lot of different ways. So I moved back here in 2008. I think it was February. And not long after I moved back here, of course I was still homeless, so I was still urgent status on the RGI, and I was just in different cities. And my CMHA worker was like, you're not moving anywhere permanently, so we're not gonna take you off the list just to have you reapply every time you move back here. Because, yeah, so thankfully, I didn't have to do that. But in 2008, my name came out for RGI. And first building I took was 580. And of course, not being from London, not knowing the RGI housing system, because I've been doing the shelter shuffle for the past 2-3 years, I had no idea the reputation or the kind of environment that 580 was back then, and for large margin still has to this day, which again I will get into in a future video. So I was just like, okay, cool, a place of my own, finally done doing the shelter shuffle, I'll take it. And for what it was worth, I usually kept to myself. I usually do. I'm very social when I'm out in the community, but if I'm living somewhere, I keep to myself. Mostly because I'm boring. Who wants to hang out with, who wants to, why would I cause trouble? I'm so boring. I like my boring life. I don't need any more excitement than I've already had. But, so I got into RGI housing then, and stayed in 580 for 8 years. I still don't understand. I still don't understand how I made it 8 years in that building. Because there was a lot of went down in that building over that time. Friends of mine were murdered in that building. Friends of mine were severely beaten in that building. Yeah, it was not a fun time. Of course, I met so many good friends that I've really lost touch with since I left, for good reason, some of them. But a few of the good friends I've still managed to run into here and there. But like 7 years into 580, it was really starting to take an impact on my mental health, because at this point in time, I had tried to attend Beale. I had attended Weeble. And me being a super naive, youth, sorry about the background, it's kind of bright, so I don't know if I can fix that at all. It's one London place, so, it's just kind of there. But back as a naive young person, I didn't know that I could have went to Fanshawe with mature student status, so I did the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. Well, one of few stupidest things I've ever done in my life, which we'll get into. I went to a private college for law clerk, because at the time law was, of course, really a passion of mine, given my circumstances. And I thought at that time that I was stable living-wise. I had worked out a pretty good routine for myself, so if I needed to get away from the building, I could, I had places I could go. Library was not one of them, because I'll get into that in a different video, but it was not necessarily the best space for me, so I had to really, it was a struggle there. I did most of my schoolwork at school. I didn't usually bring stuff home unless it was just basic documents and reading and stuff. But any of the projects where it was we need to do this project on this software. I was not as computer literate back then as I am now, and plus I only had a little netbook, a little Aspire 1 from 2010, 2011. So that's all I had, so I made it work. But, and I was in a relationship with somebody else, because the relationship I had previously with the person that was attending University of Guelph had broken down severely. And out of respect for them, I'm not going to go into details about that. It just did not work out. After 3 or 4 years. But I was in a new relationship, and I was going to school. Everything seemed just peachy keen, jelly bean, right? And then that relationship went to shit. Sorry, I know we're not supposed to technically swear on YouTube. No, this doesn't get taken out because I swore, but and it went so much that my mental health suffered severely, to the point where I couldn't stabilize it. And rather than we didn't have the crisis center at the time. So rather than going to Emerge and sitting there for hours, I just, internalized it, and just I just gave up everything, everything that I had worked so hard for. I was almost 6 months through my course at the time, but I had to withdraw, and me not being as up to date and, knowledgeable about how OSAP works, etc., I let that lapse and go into default, which brings us to modern day today, because I'm still trying to get it paid off so I can go back to school, because now that I actually know what I'm doing and know how it works. Yeah. But, so I left school, That was 2010, 2011. I met my most recent ex-partner in July of 2011. And before then, actually, when I first met them, I was still at 580. And I, of course, with everything going on with the relationship breakdown previously and everything else, like the building itself is not a good environment if you're trying to improve your life. At least it wasn't back then. I'm pretty sure things have improved just a tiny bit. I am optimistic. And they weren't doing transfers. So I found a way to get a transfer because they were only doing transfers for certain, if you met certain criteria. So I had my CMHA worker write me a letter of advocacy for the transfer saying, you know, mental health is suffering. I don't feel safe because a lot of my friends have been beaten up and murdered in that building. I didn't feel safe. So we submitted it to the office, which used to be on Dundas Street near Colborne. I remember this vividly. I took it in, and she's like, oh, you gotta fax it. Okay, cool. So we faxed it. And we're like, okay, we'll hear from them in like a couple weeks, a month. We didn't hear from them at all for a year. And of course, everything kind of was, I wasn't as on top of things as I am now. Like, if I were to be on top of it back then, I probably would have ended up moving from that building a lot sooner. So I think it was like a year later, we followed up with them because things just went and we finally got things stabilized somewhat again, and we reached out to them. They're like, oh, we never got it. So I love my old CMHA worker. She literally went above and beyond. She literally made sure that she had a copy of the letter, dated, everything, like she did the first time. But she didn't fax it, because by then they had moved to Oxford Street, I think. No, they were still at Dundas. But she literally was like, okay, I'm emailing this, I'm sending it in person, and I'm not faxing it because you guys didn't get it last time. So they got it. And a month later, I was moved. So I could have been moved months before this. But I was like, okay, cool, I'm finally getting moved. Cool, because at first I was like, okay, maybe they denied the transfer, you know, because LMCH, or LMHC as it was back then. But, so I moved into 304 Oxford. Now, of course, I'd mentioned that this was when I started seeing my most recent ex-partner. One of the few mistakes I regret making in my life. Sorry. But, yeah, so in that 10-year span, I went through so many different things. As much as I was stabilized housing-wise, I helped out a lot of my friends that weren't, which is where I got a real re-education on the precarious housing situation. And of course, back when I was a youth and, you know, young adult, and I was emancipated from my parents, so I was an adult before I was actually an adult. But back then, like, you could find a one bedroom for $400, you know, max $600. So I never really had too much of an issue when it came to, you know, finding an apartment, finding a room, etc. But I usually only rented rooms, so even then it was like $400 was like the max you would pay. How times have changed. But once I got stabilized with housing through RGI, I was, you know, within the guidelines and policies of LMCH or LMHC. I was, you know, being a crashed a couch surf option for a few of my friends. And that was when I really started to get a re-education in just how bad things have gotten since I was in the precarious renting rooms shelter shuffle. But I didn't realize how bad the shelter shuffle part was, or the shelter system, or the shelter situation, until in 2021 when I left my most recent ex-partner due to abuse, which I will definitely address in a separate video, because that story needs to be told, and he needs to be outed and shamed, because long story short, the justice system didn't do much. And again, I'll get into that in a future video. But 2021, on Valentine's Day no less, I think in like December of 2020, I was like, yeah, I'm done. But I had made the mistake of moving in with them, because up to that point, I had believed that things were stable and things were good and we were in a good spot and we had come a long way, and since all the issues we had in the past. Boy, was I wrong. I had moved in with them in October of 2020. And within a week, an abusive incident had happened. Physically abusive incident had happened. This was on top of a few others in the past that I kind of, looking back, should have taken as the first red flag and the second red flag. But me being me, I'm always giving people chances, and that's certainly taught me that that's not always a good thing. But I still try. I try and give everybody at least one second chance, but when it comes to, if you put your hands on me, you don't get a second chance from this point on. That's it. But in 2021, I left on Valentine's Day because they had a spot for me at Inova. And I will get into this in a whole separate video, but I'm going to try and continue the timeline in summary. I was not able to stay as long as I needed to in order to stabilize properly, or until proper, stable, secure, long-term housing was established. I was encouraged and forced, due to their outdated and irrelevant mandates and policies that don't actually reflect the current housing crisis we find ourselves in. But again, that's not on them, that's on the province and feds. Cool. I'm not gonna, talk bad about Inova. Staff was fantastic. But I did feel like I was pushed into a more vulnerable situation than I was already in at that time. I found a room for rent. I also applied for COHB, which, of course, I was told, this will help you with, finding an apartment, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, since my OSAP is in default, my credit rating took a nosedive, and no, I'm not eligible for, my credit score is not what would get me an apartment, even with COHB, so. But it did help me get the room for rent, even though it was like just a matter of compensating OW. Like OW would pay $390, they'd pay the rest, and it was like $800 for the room. So, surprise, surprise. And then I realized that actually did worse for me come tax time. So yeah, but I'll get into that in a different video too, because the whole COHB thing is messed up. And I was thrust back into the precarious housing situation, obviously. Not by choice. It was literally because mandates don't allow for victims of domestic violence to stay in a stable shelter until other stable accommodations can be finalized, and not just, here's rooms for rent, go find your... No. So I was thrust into the precarious housing situation. And because it was either that or they shipped me off to Exeter with my cat, because that was the only other shelter close to here that took pets. And I was like, yeah, no. I am not, no, because that will put me in an even worse vulnerable situation, because I don't know anybody in Exeter except maybe my cousins and aunt that I haven't seen in years. But yeah, no, that shouldn't be an option. Like, so I was like, you know what? And ironically, I had applied for RGI. And even though when I got COHB, I was supposed to be taken off the list, I had already secured my room for rent by this time. Otherwise, I would have been like, I'll take it. But I literally, when I got a call, and they're like, hey, we have a space for you. And I just said, you know, I'm on COHB. Like, I'm supposed to be taken off the list. So I apologize, but I'm not going to be able to take it. Because I didn't want to, you know. Because after I got COHB, I didn't know that I could just reapply. Because if I would have known that, I would have done it. Because that would have saved me a lot of heartache. But I was reintroduced to the precarious housing situation and the problems that come with that. Like, if you're renting a room in an apartment, you still don't have a say in how things run in the apartment. Even if you're subletting from somebody. If you're in the apartment more than they are, you still don't have a say because you're not on the lease. So you have no rights as a person that's renting a room. You have no, you know, protections under any legislation or any bylaws or anything of the sort. It was in that apartment when I was renting the room after leaving Nova that I came right up to that, because I wanted things to be done. Like, the person I was renting from, I think I'll go into this in a different video, but it was not a good situation. It was not a healthy environment. I cleaned that apartment so often. They had pets that were not litter trained. They had cats that were not litter trained, and they pooped and peed on everything in that living room. And they refused to remove the couch, etc. It took them weeks to adopt the cats out or give them away, which really sucks. They were like beautiful cats, and if it wasn't for the fact that I already had one, I probably would have taken them, but it sucked because those cats loved me and my cat. Like, this person was never home to take care of them, and I'd clean their litter. I'd, you know, give them fresh food and water out of their food. I would never buy food or anything for them. And it was then that I realized that part of the issue with this housing crisis is that we're getting people from outside of Canada, and I don't mean to be any kind of negative, but people that don't understand how things work here when it comes to housing, when it comes to being responsible, being an adult. And it's across the spectrum. Even Americans that move here don't understand how things work. So it's like anybody that moves here that has no idea how the laws, rules, etc. work, how being a responsible, mature adult is supposed to work. Like, I was older than this person that I was renting from, and it just, but it got to the point where she subletted her other room out to somebody else, and me and that person connected. We were like, hey, cool, we're in this together, cool, you need anything, let me know. Like, perfect, we got something that works, let's, you know. And since this person doesn't seem to be wanting to come back, let's try and get ourselves to take over the lease in some way, shape, or form. This person that we were renting from clearly doesn't know how things work when it comes to transferring a lease or transferring anything. Because we applied to transfer the lease into or to reassign the lease to us, and they got denied. So what did this person do? They were like, all right, notice, and I guess there was a notice to vacate that neither me and this other person that rented the other room knew about until we come home one night and our doors are locked. Our keys don't work because the locks were changed. Of course, everything seems to happen on check week because my check came the next day. Didn't have to worry about paying them. Because why would I? I had just paid them for an entire month. And I still haven't gotten any of my money back because, again, we don't have rights as people that rent rooms. We don't have a right to getting any of our money back. Even then, it's not really worth it. But that was when I was forced back to Salvation Army. And yeah, their main thing is also, oh, you want to find a place to live? Here's a list of rooms for rent. Have at her. And one thing that I've said to numerous social agencies in this city, you need to start vetting these freaking lists, because most of these listings are scammers or people just looking to exploit us. Literally. You need to start vetting these lists. Seriously. Because most of the ones that I tracked down and traced were scams. Or were out of service numbers. Even the newer ones, even the newer listings, out of service. Like, y'all need to start vetting these freaking lists, please. But, so in the year and a half that I was at the Salvation Army, I was in a private room for most of it, which, again, is an issue by itself. Why are you charging people $500 a month to stay in a private room in a homeless shelter? Like, and the fact is that since meals are provided, their basic needs gets obliterated. But here's the thing, the meals are just the same as those who are staying in the shelter portion. The meals aren't different or more exclusive or, more healthy or, anything. They're the same. They're the same meals. So you guys are charging $500 for, a room. That shouldn't be a thing. Like, you guys are literally exploiting the people that are depending on you for help. Like, how is that a thing? How is that acceptable? Like, people should not be having to pay for a private room in a homeless shelter. If it was a private room off property, cool, by all means. But it's a private room in the shelter that gives them nothing additional. They don't get any more quiet because then you're moving in other people to other private rooms that are the problem children from the dorms. And then you're not doing anything about it once they get up there. So, there's no real difference. We're not providing, it would be nice if you allowed us to have our full, basic needs so that we could at least, we have to buy our own cleaning products. We have to, if you're in a private room, you have to provide your own toiletries. Shampoo, conditioner, towels, etc. Well, minus one little hotel towel. That's neither here nor there, and I'll get into that in a different video. So yeah, a year and a half. I was in a private room for 364 days, because if you stay in a private room 365 days, you become a tenant, according to the Salvation Army, which I don't buy one bit. Considering up until recently, they had it so that people could stay in a private room until they found housing. So I don't buy that whole logic. But again, I will get into this in a whole different video because it belongs in its own video. But this gives you a preview of the kind of passion I have behind these things. But, and once my time in private rooms came to a private room came to an end, in that time I had met my current partner, who is fantastic. And it was totally not intentional. We just were standing in line for meals one day, and we just happened to start talking about how much we love planes, and hey, we were both in private rooms. And so we were like, hey, we can like come and go as we please, so we could, go sit at the airport for an afternoon and watch planes. So we did. Getting out there from downtown by bus, fun. But especially the air park, like the YXU car park, air park, yeah. Would be really great if there was a bus that went that far out Dundas, but too much to ask apparently. So yeah, we literally just started talking, started hanging out, like no intentions of like anything. We were just there to both do our time, because being in the Sally is like being in jail, so you look at it as you're just doing your time. Again, the Salvation Army Center of Hope will get its own entire video, as will most of the shelters in the cities I've stated. I don't think many have the same kind of longevity of a video that Center of Hope does, but that's only because I've experienced it 2 different age groups. But so yeah, like, we started hanging out, and then one day we were just kind of hanging out, we're like, hey, I think it was July, what is it with July? July of 2022? Yeah, and of course in that time, in between leaving Inova and heading back up the Sally, my court case finally came and went, because that took a year. It finished literally just before I ended up back at the Salvation Army, so yay. Again, I'll go into that in a whole different video. But, so yeah, we just started, seeing each other, being partners in July of 2022. We realized we were each other's main support system, mostly because not many people really cared about us, and that became blatantly clear when we were in the midst of a mental health crisis, both of us, because of the environment that is the Salvation Army dorms. My time in private room, and it came to an end. He had been in dorms for a few months and was not. Again, I'll get into it in a different video. But I will never forgive the staff and the board of the Center of Hope for how they choose to run that place, because it is not helping anybody, including the low barrier people. But again, I'll get into that in a different video. But I had to watch one of my best friends struggle every single day in that environment, because there's no zero tolerance policy. People could be doing fetty in the dorms and nobody gives a shit. Staff doesn't give a shit. What's the worst that they're gonna do? They're gonna send you for a walk for an hour. They're gonna confiscate what you got and then send you for a walk for an hour. Because, you're not gonna go get more on your walk. And they don't search anybody. They don't. I only got searched once, and that was when I first got there, and even then, I didn't have anything on me except my suitcase. But again, so I saw him struggling while I was still in a private room, and I felt so bad because I couldn't even allow him to, they wouldn't even allow me and him to be in a private room together. We had no interest in hooking up in our private rooms because, sorry, but not necessarily the proper place to really get you in the mood. But even for they would give him shit if he stepped in to hold my door open when I grabbed something from my room. They gave him shit. But my time in private rooms came to an end, and because they have no control over who stays in dorms, and we don't get a choice in who we stay in dorms with, otherwise I probably would have been a lot better off. I got put into a room where somebody was kicked out the day before, and they had friends in that room, and they literally made threats on my life. And one of them actually physically got in my face, and staff didn't do shit, as per usual. Things you get just for being the unfortunate individual that takes that person's bed, not by choice. But that sent me spiraling mentally. My partner was already spiraling. And of course, when I say partner, I don't mean relationship-wise, because we don't see ourselves as in a relationship. We see ourselves as in a partnership. Not even a very romantic one, just a partnership, because we've realized that we're each other's only support. We don't have any other supports, which came very clear to us when both of us, in the midst of a mental health crisis, asked for help of the staff. And I was told that I was just making a big deal because I wanted to go back into a private room and my private room time was ending. Yeah, that's why I was in a mental health crisis. And when we were like, hey, if we go to Emerge, would you guys hold our bed? No. Unless you guys are getting actually committed to the psych ward. So if we end up at the crisis center for 3 days, or, friend's place for a few days, we lose our bed at the Salvation Army. We lose the only sense of stability we have. Great policy to have, Senator Pope. Great policy. Because we can't hold beds for people. Okay, so people that have dorm beds that leave for days on end, and then you save their beds. Perfect policy there. Again, they will get their own video. But, so we both went to Emerge. Because their options were Emerge or the street. They were literally like, oh, you can go stay on the street if you don't want to be here. These are social workers talking to us like this. Keep in mind, these are trained, certified, allegedly, social workers talking to people in crisis like that. Oh, those are the only options we have. Oh, you're only in a crisis because you don't get to go back to your private room. Yeah, I'm angry about not being able to stay in a private room longer because there's still people that are grandfathered over from the old program that somehow are still able to, and you guys refuse to go back to that system for some strange reason. Oh, right, because, we don't want people dying in private rooms. Well, I would rather that than dying in dorms, but again, they'll get their own video. So we ended up going to Emerge. Gotta love downtown. We ended up going to Emerge. How's my battery? 58%. Okay, we're good. So we ended up going to Emerge. And I ended up getting sent to the crisis center because they only had one spot left. Thankfully, one of our friends that lives close to the crisis center was like, hey, you can stay with us because they were going to try and get into the crisis center the next day. So, but eventually both of us ended up there, and both ended up at the crisis center, which is where we were confronted with the fact that
usually CMHA doesn't allow people that know each other to stay at the crisis center. 99% sure that most of the clients that come through those doors know each other on the outside, but neither here nor there. They're like, oh, just don't make it obvious. I'm like, that's entirely backwards. If you're trying to support somebody in a crisis and you're telling them in that crisis they can't behave around their main support system the same way they would outside of it, only because you guys don't want it creating an issue. Well, we weren't really doing anything outside that would create an issue to begin with, but inside we were also not doing much except spending time together. Again, I'll get into that in a different video. But in that time, CMHA gave us the housing lists, which again, you guys need to start vetting and not just handing them off to people and be like, hey, here you go. Because we are still of the mindset that we are not ever going back to the Center of Hope unless we are dying. And even then, we'll probably end up in Merge. That place is toxic. And again, I'll get into it in a different video, but it shocks me that the city funds a toxic wet shelter like that incredibly contributes to the very issues of homelessness, addiction, etc., because there's no safeguards there. There's no abstinence there. They have a withdrawal management program in that building, and guess what? Most of the people that go there do not stay sober in that program because they're surrounded by fucking drug addicts. Not only outside, but inside, in the stairwells, in the elevators. And it's not like I haven't tried to talk to executive director or the board about this at all, because I've actually done the opposite. I've talked to death to them, and it's fallen on deaf ears, and it's disgusting that they enable this to continue. Oh, we're trying to support people. Well, you're not supporting people by just letting them run the frickin' asylum. You're not helping people that are trying to stay sober by not giving them any safety or separation from the things that were keeping them sick until they decided to get clean and sober. And you're not keeping people healthy because you're in dorm rooms with people that are doing various amounts of drugs all hours of the day and night, except between 10 and 2 when the dorms are locked. Ooh, that would be perfect for people that would like to sleep, that didn't get to sleep the night before because of fights, etc. Again, I'll get into it in a different video, but in the time that we were at the crisis center, it's going to be an interesting series, guys. Strap in. But in the time we were at the crisis center, we had gone through all of those listings, new and old. Most were scams. Most couldn't speak English. Most were not willing to take couples or couples with pets, or a pet, even a cat, an indoor cat that doesn't leave my room ever. Nobody would take couples. Because, oh, we want, this room can only accommodate one person. When their bed is a queen size bed in the room that can more than accommodate 2 people. And this, again, is where I was reintroduced to the fact that as people that rent a room, there is blatant discrimination going on across the board. And there's nothing in any legislation that prevents people from being able to say no to couples. Like, sure, it's an Ontario human rights complaint, but guess what? They have enough. If they get fined, they'll pay the fine. There's nothing anywhere that prevents this from being a reality. And I'll go into that in our next video. Because boy howdy, is that going to be a doozy. But thankfully, in the time we were doing this, one of our friends that lived close to the crisis center that they had stayed with before they got into the crisis center. Our friends had said, hey, we have a friend who's staying with somebody in our complex, and they're renting, they're looking for somebody to rent their room. And we were so desperate for housing, for not to be forced to go back to the Salvation Army. We were so desperate for something that wasn't the Salvation Army that we took it. We ignored all the red flags that presented themselves within 2 months. The red flags were there day one, but they became blaringly obvious over the 2 months we were there. We're like, hey, we're going to be here for a bit. We can actually try and stabilize. We kept to ourselves. We didn't do anything wrong. We, helped out when we were asked, But we didn't do anything wrong. We were, And then our friend that was staying with them got kicked out for stupid reason. Out of respect for our friend, I'm not going to go into that. But in that time, when they left, we started getting accused of the things that they were doing, among other things. We got accused of stealing food. We got accused of this, that, and the other. We bought our own food. They bought their own food. They would run out of food before we did because, hello, we kind of budgeted it a little bit better. And then they would blame us because they'd be missing food because they didn't buy enough. Or we have a feeling they have early stages, if not advanced stages of dementia, to the point where they forgot they used that food and then thought it was us that took it. Like if we had eggs, they'd accuse us of stealing theirs. We literally had a receipt with eggs on it. That wasn't all we bought, but we had the receipt. And they still wouldn't believe it. Not only that, but they come in on our door all hours of the day accusing us of stuff. Now keep in mind, we had begged people to help us with first and last for this place. And we were about to go to the Housing Stability Bank when one of my friends came through. So thank you to that friend. You know who you are. We're just sorry that it didn't allow us to. Yeah. So 2 months later, we were like, okay, we need to look at a new place. We need to find a place, which, as I explained earlier, is kind of difficult when you're a couple, especially when you're a cis female. Well, you're not really a couple, you're just two people, but you're a cis female and a non-binary individual. There is so much gender and sexual orientation discrimination with housing when it comes to renting rooms. Some people want specifically women. Some people want specifically men. Some people want, and I get that. They're more comfortable that way. But guess what? In Ontario, you don't get to dictate that. If two people that can afford the rent come to you and say, hey, we want to rent this room, until it becomes an issue after they move in, you shouldn't have any place to deny them. But guess what? It happens. And what do we have to do about it? Nothing. We are literally at the mercy of strangers until our name comes up for RGI. And this is happening not only to us, but to several thousand people in our city. And these are the very people that are never mentioned, never supported. None of these agencies like 519 Pursuit or Arc-Aid or any of them actually do anything for those that are the hidden homeless, because they consider us housed. Oh, you're in a room, you're housed. No, we're not. We are precariously housed just as much as people in encampments and in shelters, because none of that is stable and secure and long term. But we don't get those same supports. We don't get the supports of being helped into getting housing. We aren't seen as a priority for housing, period. Like, we don't classify as urgent because we're renting rooms. We're glorified couch surfing. We are glorified guests in somebody's home. We are glorified couch surfing. But because of that, we are not considered an urgent enough status to get housing quicker. Instead, we're having to wait behind people that are high acuity. Or, sorry, I'm going to erase that completely. People that are overdosing quite regularly and ending up in the hospital. And in the meantime of us waiting longer, even though it's supposed to be, what, the city said they changed it to 80% urgent, 20% wait list? Or 80% wait list? Yeah, 80% wait list, 20% urgent. Well, we're on the normal wait list, and yet we're nowhere near closer to getting into housing. Because, again, we are having to wait for people that are revolving doors in housing, that get into housing, destroy their units, destroy their entire, burn the bridge, and then right after they get evicted, oh, we'll help you again, without having to get to the back of the fucking line with the rest of us. I'm sorry, but that's bull. There are people that are waiting on this waiting list that are ideal tenants for these places. RGI. Ideal tenants for RGI that wouldn't destroy the unit, that wouldn't destroy the building itself, that wouldn't cause other people in the building such ridiculous amounts of stress and lack of sleep. But no, let's not put them as a priority. Let's put the ones that are the problem as the priority. Because, we don't want people ending up in the hospital so much. Well, maybe if, you would stop, allowing them to do drugs everywhere and actually had harm reduction with abstinence involved, and where your only option wasn't, we'll give you more drugs to get off the drugs you're on, and then you can sell those and still get the drug that you prefer, because it happens, contrary to Dr. Andrea Serena's word, it happens. I've seen it with my own 4 eyes. But these are the people that we are forced to be behind in the line for housing, because we aren't high acuity according to the criteria of the city. Guess what? We are high acuity because we are entirely isolated from supports that we need, other than 9 sessions here, 9 sessions there, and then if you need anything, reach out. We don't have any consistent supports. We don't have any outreach agencies coming to us, because God forbid they had to come outside the downtown core. I'm trying not to yell because I'm in I don't want to get kicked out of the library. But the hidden homeless, the precariously housed, that are renting rooms in houses, apartments, etc., they're being completely forgotten about when it comes to getting them into stable and secure and proper housing. And much of it is, yes, it has to do with provincial and federal mandates for RGI housing. But there's also a responsibility at the municipal level that needs to be reintroduced. Because you can't keep helping just one group of the overall unhoused population. You should be helping everybody equally. Not focusing on one group getting into housing quicker. You should be focusing on, hey, we need to get everybody that's on the wait list into housing quicker. How can we do that? We also need to be giving people that are unhoused the same wraparound supports regardless of the circumstance they're in. They shouldn't need to be in an encampment or in a shelter to have access to 519 Pursuit or Project Hope or Arcade, etc. And we should be having support centers outside of the downtown core that are actually accessible for people. Like, that's one thing I will give the library. They have mental health supports. But they only have it in few locations. They don't have them in all of the locations, and by all means, they should be. But I'm not going to get into that whole budget thing because they undercut themselves in the budget ask that they gave to the city, so that's neither here nor there. But CMHA, they'll get their own video, trust me. CMHA, who was supposed to have a hub up and running for people, then got pretty much shot to death because they didn't do their homework right off the hop. That's not on the city, that's on you. And are seemingly in no rush to find another thing to have a hub open. Nor are they in much of a rush to have a crisis center in, South London, West London, East London, North London. And no, the one at 648 Huron is not North London. Nah. North London would be Fanshawe and freaking Adelaide. Or Fanshawe and Richmond. Or Fanshawe and Hyde Park, where your hub was supposed to go. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, none of these agencies are willing to have their supports outside of a centralized area. Guess what? Not everybody that's unhoused is in that central area. Not everybody that's unhoused feels safe in that central area. And they want to stay away from the central area. For a wide variety of reasons. And if you were an agency worth your salt or a social worker worth your salt, you'd understand and know why. I shouldn't have to explain it to you, but I will in another video. But yeah, so that brings us to current day. We are currently looking at another place because the dynamic of the family we're staying with has deteriorated in the past few months. We were perfectly fine the first couple months, and the dynamic with the family we're staying with is, plus not being anywhere near transit except one route, is really counterproductive, and especially with the nicer weather coming, we'd like to be out more, but spending 6 hours to and from by bus by itself to get it anywhere, yeah, that kind of exhausts you, even thinking about. At least it should. But yeah, hopefully that's a little intro and brief summary of what brought me to this point. And hopefully you've seen that clearly I'm passionate about a lot of the stuff that has to do with the unhoused population. And I don't mean to be critical of, people that are addicts, etc. No, you guys need better, you guys deserve better too. You deserve better supports. You deserve to be able to have abstinence be a part of your harm reduction. If you're trying to cut down or, quit, and your only other option shouldn't be, oh, here's a different kind of drug for you to take, for you to get addicted to that's going to have long-term health effects. Many times worse than fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, etc. Like, you guys deserve better too. And you guys deserve to have more indwell housing. Like, more housing that properly has wraparound supports for you guys and gals, etc. So that way it frees up more of the spaces in non-wraparound services buildings for people that aren't in your position. I see both sides, I understand both sides. I understand more perspectives than just my own. I've seen different perspectives from my own, like I may not have lived experience with being an addict or etc. other than being addicted to cigarettes and coffee. But No, and I don't ever don't want anybody to think that I'm against addicts or whatever. No, I'm against the system itself, because the system has set it up so that addicts just continue to be addicts. And that's not just at the municipal level, that's at every level. But I hope that this is a good first little introduction to hour and 20 minutes, so sorry. But I hope it's worth it, because I've been putting this off because things have been nuts. But I wanted to get this out there, and I promise next time from here on out, I'll have a topic each video, not just like today, this episode was just like, okay, here's my story, here's how I come into the conversation, and here's where here's my navigational story of the system. But yeah, so I think next one, I might do the Center of Hope next, because I think that is one that needs to be discussed. And now that I'm not a client there anymore, I don't have to worry about confidentiality. It's the only confidentiality I'll be breaking is my own, and maybe my partner's, which they don't mind, because as long as I don't use their name, there's very few people that will know who my partner is. So, and even then, it's nothing super incriminating, because certainly not him doing the damage. But yeah, I think the Center of Hope will be my next video, because that needs to be a part of the wider conversation too. Because not-for-profits that are given funding to run shelter spaces, for example, when Safe Space got the $300,000 that the city gave to them instead of the Center of Hope took it upon themselves to take that $300,000 out of their own funding as a not-for-profit and put it towards the bare minimum of new security and additional bed spaces, etc. So, and considering they're tax exempt and they don't really seem to be audited too much. Yeah, definitely a topic worth talking about, and I will try not to come across so critical of them, but having been through it 2 different times, I can see where they've gone, where they've succeeded, where they've failed, and where they continue to fail. And the fact that they were less than open to, actually changing their programming to better suit their clients after I talked to them on the behalf of many clients. I'm scared, and I'm frustrated with the fact that this organization and this place still gets city funding because they claim to be helping the homelessness crisis when they are doing the absolute opposite. And it would only take anybody in any kind of authority to spend a week in this place to realize that. But of course, that would never happen because they'd roll out the red carpet for you guys. They'd hide all the imperfections like they do when you guys come for tours, which clients are never welcome to join in on or ask questions or, anything. So that tells you how much they value their clients. Well, the only clients that are invited are the ones that kiss their ass. The ones that, see what's going on for what it is, not usually invited. Interesting, right? And I wish I was just basing that on my own experience. No, it's been the experience of a lot of clients in the past 5-10 years. But that's neither here nor there. So, almost in an hour and a half. So, hopefully you guys enjoyed this kind of brush up on things. Sorry about the timeline lapses. I got the basic timeline down, like moving from different cities. Just the years was a little off, but the main important parts of the story, I hope, got included, but hopefully this sparks a conversation. I don't ever expect me to spark a conversation that changes things. It would be nice, but I know I don't have that kind of pull or that kind of power. I wish I did, because I would have done this years ago. But yeah, feel free to start a conversation in the comments. Continue the conversation in the comments. Pretty sure my email is on my profile somewhere on YouTube, so it should be easy to find. But if else fails, message me on YouTube. I don't even think that's a thing, but I'll find out. I'm pretty sure my email address should be, or if you just, like, it's literally my username, milishi@gmail.com. So feel free to send me a line. But yeah, I'm gonna finish up in my 2 hours here. But talk to you guys later. Thanks for joining me. Sorry it took so long to get to this episode, but hopefully now that we started, it's just gonna go up from here. So I will catch you guys later.